Madam Clerk, let's come out of deliberative session. Okay, we are out of deliberative session, and we are going to be contacting
David
Whiting from ASD, who is going to give the board some further background on how purchasing and contracts are arranged within ASD.
Dave Whiting, purchasing.
Hi, Dave. This is Terry Kelly from the Municipal City Board of Ethics.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
Good. Well, as you know, we're calling you about the Jim Dooley situation, and the board had some questions for you in terms of. I suppose if maybe we could start. Could you just give us sort of the background of the situation from your perspective? I mean, what is it about what Mr. Dooley is doing that sort of gives you heartburn from the ASD perspective?
Nothing. Actually, I'll just give you the short, it's a very, very simple issue. So Mr. Dooley's not doing anything wrong. What has occurred is we're just applying the normal standard waiver process to Mr. Dooley as a district employee that we apply to all other district employees that choose to do business with the district. And so I can, in short, describe that to you, to your board there.
Sure, that'd be great.
So basically, part of the process, when a district employee wishes to do business with the district, there's just a couple simple steps they have to go through. So they file for a waiver, which needs to be approved by some of the chiefs, usually one or two chiefs of the chief level at the district, and then myself. If we believe that the conflict, the nature of the business they want to conduct is manageable, then we will, the chief and I will agree that we will sign off on the waiver, providing that employee follows board policy in regard to conducting their business. And the two major issues to follow board policy are that once they are approved as a waiver, have a waiver to do business with the district, that they cannot do business with the department they're employed by. And the other is that any purchases made from them must be competitively competed. And so that's really the basic format. It's pretty simple. And so that is what Mr. Dooley and all other district employees that wish to do business with the district must operate under.
Good. And I take it that your view then is that when you say you may not do business with the department that the employee works in, that your perspective is that's the school.
It would be the business unit or
Okay.
school. Anchorage School District has, as you know, we have schools, and then we have business units. So we would apply that standard to whichever entity as appropriate.
Hey Dave, this is Dee. What's an example of a business unit?
Business unit would be the purchasing department, the CP&C, otherwise known as the facilities department, maintenance, operation and maintenance, that kind of thing. Different departments are business units.
And so from that perspective, then Mr. Dooley would not be free to sell his products to teams at East High School because he's an employee there.
Correct.
Okay.
And that is how we apply that district-wide with any employee that gets an approved waiver. We apply that standard.
Okay, good. Another thing that we were discussing was the role of or the access to information that Mr. Dooley might have given his position in East High School. What's your view on that? Do you think someone in his position, so he's a volleyball coach at East High School, would he have access to information that by and large the public would not have access to in terms of things that might be advantageous to his business?
Yes, he would. Yeah, certainly. And again, I don't know that the point is particularly salient, but due to the fact that the application of our policy is that we do not allow, across the board district employees with a waiver to do business with their department, which we define as their business unit or school. But in my mind, it's very simple to see that when an employee of a school that has personal relationships with the coaches and with the employees and with different individuals there certainly would have access and knowledge and advantages that just your public salesman off the street who had no relationship with these folks wouldn't have. So it's, I've been in purchasing for almost 30 years, so I to me it's quite evident.
Does anyone else on the board have
I do have a question. Dave, let's say Chess Club wants T-shirts. This is actually for my own edification. So Chess Club wants T-shirts. That actually can go through the activities director at East. It doesn't even have to go through a central procurement process. Is that true?
Well, depending on the level of purchases. Well, first, if you want to, I think, was that Dee that posed that question?
Dee, yeah.
Oh, hi, Dee.
Yeah, hi.
So, yeah, what we delve into some nuances here. So what we have is we have different flavors of funding that the Anchorage School District uses, and I'll just use I'll use two general categories so we don't get into the weeds here, but there are many. But for this conversation, we would just look at activities funds and general funds. So first, general funds are governed by all of the procurement policies, all applicable federal, state, municipal statutes, etc. They are our normal funding that is public, we believe taxpayer money, public funding. Then when we get into activities funds, those are funds raised by often nonprofits like a PTA or a PTSA or a booster club, somebody like that. And those funds, they are not subject to Board Policy 725 procurement policy. However, they are subject to any applicable conflict of interest policies. And so those funds, by default, as I described earlier, when you go through the conflict of interest policy, you then find that they must be competed. So there is not really a loophole to get away from following policy, because the conflict of interest policy for activities funds prevails, and it then triggers several other things. So that's where. So again, if you use, let's say a chess club is they're not funded by district general operating funds. They are funded by, let's say they do bake sales or something, or they do some sort of fundraising for the chess club, and they decide they want to buy T-shirts. So they are free to spend that money as they see fit, and they would not have any concern about Board Policy 725, kind of curtailing their competitive thresholds. Often T-shirts would fall below $5,000, obviously. And so even if it were under board policy, it would not require, competition. However, when you get to a situation where they want to do business with a employee of the district, then it would trigger those issues. So if, let's say the chess club wanted to do business with Mr. Dooley. Mr. Dooley works at, if it's the East High Chess Club, they would be prohibited from doing that. Now, if they wanted to do business with there's another gentleman, I believe, trying to remember, there was another person that was selling similar products. I think it's Mr. Yip. And so he operates out of a different school, I believe. I don't have it in front of me here, but just going off memory. So if the chess club wanted to buy something from Mr. Yip, it must be competed because he's a district employee with a waiver that can do business with, other than his department at the district, he can do business with other district departments provided that it is competed, for that purchase.
And Dave, see, what I'm trying to get at is, it seems to me that if the chess club needs T-shirts and they're not using the taxpayer funds, that when Mr. Dooley makes a deal with or has contact with that chess club, that's not being removed to a central procurement process, so that Mr. Dooley, in fact, has much more influence. Or could have more potential influence.
A vendor could potentially have more influence in that way. Again, if you're talking about the same high school, he would have access to. He'd be able to roam the facility freely, speak to the employees, speak to the different public officials, district officials that are in that school that make decisions.
And it could be an activity director, right, at each.
Sure.
Versus you guys in central procurement.
Yes, and again, I don't want to go, I can certainly go into the history if you'd like, Dee, but, honestly, what we had in the past is the purchasing department made it quite clear to Mr. Dooley that these unauthorized activities purchases with activities funds were not allowable per conflict of interest policy.
Right.
And we both verbally spoke to him, we put it in writing for several years, and he, his take on it was that he didn't understand what we were saying, so that's why he continued to engage in purchases with East High School, selling them to East High School as a vendor, because he didn't understand. That was his position. He couldn't understand the communications he was being given. But the last meeting we had with him, kind of what I call, the come to Jesus type meeting, we spoke to him and said, look, we need, for you to get a waiver approved at this point, you need to confirm that you understand the policies. Okay. And so he did acknowledge that, say, yes, I do understand now. Before I didn't understand, now I do understand. I can't sell to East High School. Okay. And so really that's that's where we stand right now. Yeah. We have several years of unauthorized activity there, and the only reason that we did pull, the chief academic officer pulled his waiver because he wasn't following the conflict of interest policy with activities funds. He was in my view was that he was disregarding them. Can I prove that? I don't know.
But Mr. Whiting, this is an open meeting, so unless we go into deliberative session, let's not say anything more. Yep. It's clear that that in the school district's opinion, he's not following the waiver guidelines, which are applicable to everybody. But now he seems to understand those guidelines.
Yeah, we did pull the waiver, then we met with him, and then he confirmed that he understood, and that he would continue and abide by the policies, and so we reinstated, the chief academic officer made a recommendation to reinstate his waiver, and we did. And so now, again, we're back to the original conversation, is we're merely applying the normal policies that any other employee follows when doing business with the Anchorage School District as an employee.
Okay.
Mr. Could you roughly, do you know when you had that meeting with him, the Come to Jesus policy meeting with Mr. Dooley?
Yeah, I can't. I don't have it offhand. I'd have to go back in the records. It was probably within the past year, I would believe. It's when the intent was to just talk to him and say, hey, we need to be, he submitted a waiver, wanted it approved, and we said, well, before we approve it, we just have to be clear that, his previous discussion of, well, I didn't understand the policy wasn't going to work with approving a new waiver. There had to be an understanding of the policy. And so at that meeting, in short, what we did is we discussed with him that in great detail what the policy was, and he said he understood it and he would abide by it.
Okay. And then just to be clear, when you say that the concern was in terms of the conflict of interest policy, you're talking about ASD's conflict of interest policy, not the conflict of interest policy in the municipal code of ethics.
Yeah, again, I'm not an attorney like Dee, but my understanding is that our board policies have been modeled after, to comply, certainly with municipal code in regard to conflict of interest, but there are policies that we apply. And that is, as a purchasing director here, I use Anchorage School Board policy to conduct business, and I don't believe they, conflict with other statutory or regulatory or code.
Okay, good. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Williams?
I do for another matter too. Dave, remember we had talked briefly about the relationship of the school board to the contracting process, and that's because one of the school board members' husband does he have? Hold on. And there's more information. We were particularly concerned about the Terry Agosti.
Tam, I think is her name.
Oh, Tam, I'm
Her
sorry,
brother,
Tammy.
Tammy David Dunn.
Let's see. And you had explained that to me quickly, and I said it was much better than me trying to re-explain what you said.
Yeah, I can certainly broadly. I do have the paperwork for President Auguste Giesler, and she did have. There is a disclosure regarding a business that one of her family members owns. I believe it's her brother's.
Yeah, it says brothers.
And I do not. So that's what I have there for President Auguste Giesler. The real issue in terms of the board is that the board contracts do come before the board at different times depending on their thresholds. When a contract reaches a certain threshold, it would trigger, per board policy, it would require board approval, and also amendments, change orders, contract modifications that reach a certain threshold also trigger board approval. If there is ever an instance where a board member there's a disclosure regarding a family member of a board, immediate family member, we call it, of a board member, they just recuse themselves. And in the 5 years that I've been here, I'm trying to recall if we've ever had a contract come before the board that an individual had to recuse themselves on, and I don't know if we have. If we have, it obviously couldn't have been very many, but I can't really recall an instance where we've had that occur. But they would certainly recuse themselves if that were to occur. And I attend every board meeting, and I know of all the board memos that are on the agenda, so I would certainly be mindful of that, but it has not been a problem at the district.
Okay. And of course, we have that same issue with our assembly members. So they're married to spouses that own architectural firms and all sorts of stuff. So.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that's all I had questions as a board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Dave, thank you so much, and thank you for waiting 15 minutes. Of course, we had to discuss. We were about to call you an hour later, but I encouraged us to try to call you at least close to the designated time. But
Yes, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you.
okay, thanks, Dave.
Uh-huh.
Well, it sounds like he got away with the facts.
Yeah, it sounded like that to me too. On the promise that he behaved himself. So.
Right, and so the original, the wrote, stands.
Well, it does, and I mean, I think what he's really asking us, and I don't know if we need to go into the deliberative process at this
We
point.
probably should, yes.
Okay.
Can you have a motion?
We have a motion to move that to
So moved.
deliberative session.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, let's go back into deliberative session.